So our guest artist tonight is Brienne Brown. She lives out in the country in central Pennsylvania, so experiences many seasons in the rural areas around her and paints them. She has a degree actually in chemistry, but she's been painting since age 11 and drawing oils and pencil and ink and started watercolor, I believe, in 2007. So it wasn't all that long ago. She's an outstanding artist. I've been following her work on YouTube, and she's won many awards starting in 2011. She's also, I think there's like 5 organizations that she's a signature member of. I'll just name a few: National Watercolor Society, the Western Federation of Watercolor Societies, the Pennsylvania Watercolor Society, Utah Watercolor Society, and she's also a founding member of the Plein Air Painters of Central Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania actually has a very strong history of artists over the last 100 years. So she's fitting right in. And with that, I'm going to introduce Brienne, and you can take it from here.
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to, share with you what some thoughts, some tips, and I would welcome any questions, as I go. What Art said was all great. I just want to add one more thing. I've always done art, like he said. I'd always been drawing and that kind of stuff. But it wasn't till grad school in chemistry that I realized I had no time for art, no time to paint. And I realized I was miserable. And it wasn't just the hours I was working. It was because I didn't have that creative outlet. And so from then, I made it a point to have it a part of my life. And that's why I've continued to do it, even when my kids were young. I still have some young kids, but when they started, I knew I couldn't put it down. And so that's where it's brought me today. And I love it. It was not my plan. I was going to be a doctor, a researcher, and there you go. Voila. I'm an artist, and I teach and I paint, and I love it. So, and I'm a mom, of course. So today, what I want to share with you is some tips and thoughts on painting snow. Now, this will also encompass other things. So whenever I do a demo or, just like this, I like to focus it on some good principles or ideas, because I'm really big when I teach workshops, when I, teach my mentor students, I focus on concepts, because I think concepts help us the most when you go to how can you implement these things in your own art. So it's not just about spouting and memorizing rules or guidelines, because those are really only so helpful. I want to explain why. Why is it a guideline or that kind of thing, so that's the way I like to go about this. So please, as we go, yes, ask questions, type to Deidre and Art, and they'll relay them to me. So to start with, I'm going to share a few slides just so that you can see some of the ideas that I want to talk about here. Okay, so first off, when painting snow, whenever we're painting any kind of scene, whether you're looking at, a landscape, which yes, I'm mostly a landscape artist at this time, or you're doing portraits or the figure or, still life, whatever subjects you like to paint, really, it's all about, shapes, shapes and value and color and how they're put together. And all of that is the basic building blocks of any kind of painting. The nice thing about snow and what makes painting snow so fun is it eliminates a lot of color confusion, right? And it really forces more contrast in value. And so you got the white, the blankets, the land, and then you've got darks to work with, and you've got, you know, a lot of wonderful mid and light values to work with. So that's why snow scenes can be so dramatic. Okay, now let's go. One thing I want to point out is that snow is not always white, okay? There are variations of white. So if you look at this picture where we have this white bar or the white around, okay? And I hope you can see my cursor, but the only real white part of the snow is looking through these dark branches. And part of that has to do with the contrast we see of those dark shapes with that white snow behind it. Also, that's where the sun is really beating down in that area. If we go over to this left side, where the sun is not in direct, I mean, it's still shining on it, but not in relationship to where we are, it's grayer, it's more gray, okay? And it's not pure white. Only when you've got the plane that faces the sun directly are you gonna get that pure white. So it's something to keep in mind, because if you always, when you paint your snow scenes, if you leave everything white, without any kind of variation, it can look unnatural. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. Also, the colors of the light and shadow depend hugely on light conditions. This is true whether it's a snow scene or not, but snow makes it so much more apparent because it's so reflective. Okay, so in this on the left here, we see we have a nice strong shadow, but because it's more overcast, even though I do have a direct sun in this picture, see how the shadow is gray, where the one on the right with that blue sky, no clouds, that shadow is blue, right? And so it is reflecting the sky. So, and the same thing happens with water. But here we've got, or a similar thing happens with water. Other things happen too, but with the snow, it's so much more direct. Okay, this plane, the surface of the snow that's facing the sky is going to be blue if that sky is blue, or gray if that sky is gray. Okay, the other thing, which may be hard to see in this, but also the light of the snow is more gray in the one on the left, and actually brighter and lighter and warmer in the one on the right. Okay. All right. And this is just zooming in a little bit so we can see some of that. But if we were to isolate this light part right here, it would actually be gray. The whitest white is the highlights that are on the surface of these snow drifts. The ones that are directly facing the sun will be lighter and warmer. But then as it turns over, or the face is facing the sky, it will be cooler and grayer. Okay, same thing happens over here, though it's not as dramatic. Okay. All right, another thing I want to point out is that with shadows on snow, the fun thing about that is that, like I said, because we've eliminated color, right, and that everything is white, the reflection is so, what do you want to say? It's so apparent. It's so easy to see. So if we look at this one's fun because you've got this shadow out here, and see how blue that is. Again, this is on a sunny day with a blue sky. But if we look back in here, and maybe it's hard to see, and I'm going to zoom in a little, it's warm. Do you see how warm that gray is? And it's because it's reflecting off of the warmth of this wood pile, okay? And so the snow, because of the white, you can see that variation so much stronger. The same variation would happen in grass, but you're not gonna see it as much. But that's why we say a lot of times, if there's a blue sky, the shadow will be a lot cooler, especially as it recedes from the object, because it's going to reflect more of that sky color. Okay. Now on a gray day, again, that coolness is not going to be as dramatic. Okay. Any questions on that that we have? All right. Let's keep going. Let me show you some examples. Oh, hold on. Hey, there we go. Okay, so when we paint, do we have to think about all the different nuances? Not necessarily. One key thing about snow and shadow is also variation in value is a key thing, okay? And then we can change those colors, but as long as we vary these colors within the shadows, you can make for an interesting painting. So I paint more impressionistically, so I'm not looking for total realism, but I still keep in mind that variation, okay, because then it'll make your paintings more exciting. Okay, if we go to this one, I don't paint a lot of blue sky days. I don't know what that says about me. I don't know if I'm, you know, just, I do love gray days, or maybe it's because I'm in Pennsylvania and we have gray days. But here's another one where I just wanted to show that I didn't leave a lot of white paper. The only areas were actually a few spots in here and then a little bit over here, but the rest of this, I washed it down with dirty water, basically. Getting the idea that I'm not leaving any white areas, okay? Or few, some, just kind of vary it. Okay, on this one, this is another painting I did that's more of that gray day again, but yet grayer shadows. So now I don't have that bright blue shadow, and except for where it's reflecting from the blue of this this building over here. But notice how I try to pay attention. See the dirtiness on top? I don't want to call it dirtiness. It's just a value shift and temperature shift. It's warmer and then grayer. But see, I did leave white areas where the side of the snow would reflect the sun. So leaving some of those areas helps to give that feeling of the dip in those ruts, okay? By having that variation of the white with the little slightly darker value. And it's very slight. Again, I use mostly dirty water. It's very, very weak. Not a lot of color or pigment, but just some.
So Brienne, we have a question from one of our viewers about the size of the paintings that you're showing us.
Oh, yes.
I can
just
a reference. What is the size?
Sure. This one is about 12 by 20. And this one was about, I want to say this was 10 by 16. So it was a little longer. And this one is a half sheet.
Okay.
So 14 by 20, something like that. So a lot of these are that half sheet. This one on the right is also a half sheet. This one on the left is like a quarter. So more like 10 by 14.
Okay.
Now, so good question. I can mention that for the later ones. Okay, so I think I said all the ones in this one. Yeah, just mostly I focused on the shadow colors, making sure. Now, okay, I do want to mention one other thing though about shadow colors is I also put the bluest part, the more colored part, kind of in the area as far as the shadow goes. I specifically put it in areas that I wanted the eye to go as well. So we as artists, we have to, or I try to find, this is my goal, to find a balance between what is observable, what do I observe when I'm on site. I do a lot of plein air. I love it. I love plein air because it's information gathering and you learn what light does. And so I get to learn, you know, I want to create that natural sense, but at the same time, I'm also designing a painting. So I have a balance between what is natural, what do I see, but then also visually, what do I need in my painting? So I'm always trying to find that balance, which is tricky. Okay. But okay, so there's some of that. Now these ones I wanted to show you because again, another gray, these are more gray days. This one has basically no shadows at all. It's the foggy days of Pennsylvania, which I'm actually originally from Utah, where we had all sun pretty much. So fog to me was magical. and still is. I love foggy days. And I think it's just because it's unique to me. So anyways, I love that. But see, in here, the only whites that I left behind from the white of the paper is right in here. There's just this little spot of white, and it has nothing to do with it was really there. That again is a contrast issue to where the dirty kind of white, grayish white around it, and then at the center of the interest, that's the only place where I have my white. Okay, so it is more of a design issue than an actual scene issue. Okay, over here, again, I left hardly any white except for just on the tops of these wood piles. Okay, so we can pick and choose and decide where we want to put the whites, but basically having variation in your lights for the snow will create more interest and be more natural. Okay, I also want to say one more thing about low light. Look how warm the light on that snow is. Okay, it's not white, it's gray, but it's warm. And there are some little bits of white, and that's just where that surface, right, is facing the sun, will be warmer and lighter, but the rest around it, see how warm that is and how cool the shadow is. And I try to think about that sometimes when I have more low light conditions. The value is less, and then the whites are warmer and the shadows are cooler. Okay, these ones are small. This one's like an 8 by 10 on the left, and the one on the right is like a 10 by 14 for reference. Okay, so this is the reference photo that I'm going to be using today for my demo. I'm actually going to do a blue sky, and so we've got this blue shadow, which will be great. The other thing it has that I want to show you what I do is we want to look at the colors of the shadow and the colors of the lights, and this is the kind of thing that I would keep in mind. Okay, so for instance, the blue in the shadow, the surface that's facing the sky, okay, that's parallel to the sky, is going to be cooler and bluer than see how this goes down. This is facing away from the sky and away from the sun. It's going to be darker and warmer. Okay, just little things to think about, slight subtle changes, but it brings sophistication to your paintings if you can look at this. Again, it's not the overall composition, it's not the big shapes, but it's just some subtle details that can help improve your paintings. Okay, here, this is interesting. So back here, the light of the snow here, okay, is light. It's light, but it's also cooler than the lights that are directly facing the sun, which is on this edge. See how much warmer that white is. Okay, and then look at the light part where it's facing the sky. See how gray that is, okay, and cooler. All right, so there's variation within that, within the ridges on this great track. And so those are the type of things I'm going to try to capture. All right, I've done a value study. I do a value study before every painting, whether I'm in the studio or on site. I just find that there's so many unknowns and things that pop up when we're painting watercolor anyways. I like to have my design at least an idea of it. And my value studies are usually, this one's about 3 by 4 inches, and they're no bigger than that. That's as big. That's usually as big as I do them. And they usually take me 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, depending on how complex. All right. Here's the start, and let's get to the demonstration, unless someone has a question.
Nope, I think we're good to go.
All right, we're good. Let's do it. Okay, so I'm going to switch my camera over to my overhead. And all right, so I hope you can see. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see my painting area. So this is where I paint. I have this little L. I have my water. I have actually 2 water containers here, and all my brushes are on this side. And then here's my reference photo, the painting, and then my study. Right. and my palette. All right, and I will talk about colors and my brushes, but I'm going to get started on the painting first because we're going to have to let the first wash dry. So I do paint with a first wash and then basically all my lights, and then I go to middle values and then dark. So basically pretty classic technique or way to work with watercolor, from light to dark. Okay, so I did make some slight compositional changes, but overall I'm keeping with it. All right, I've drawn this out, but now what I'm going to do is just go over it with a kneaded eraser, try to pick up some excess stuff. And again, these are guidelines for me. I'm not going to necessarily exactly follow these lines. They just help me know about where the shapes are. Okay. So, but I just wanted you to be able to see it a little better. So I'm not erasing, but I'm just gently going over the whole thing. Okay. Now, to start with, just so you know what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put the blue of the sky in, and I'll bring some warmer tones in here, and this will be the light areas of the snow is what I'm going to go about. So I'm not going to do the shadow or anything of that yet. Okay, it's just going to be the light areas of the snow. And I'm going to go around where I want white, and I'll leave that for later. Okay, so first thing I do before any first wash is get pools of paint out. Okay, and I almost always start with some combination of a red, yellow, and a blue. My most common and favorite combination is cobalt blue, quinacridone rose, and transparent yellow oxide. And let's see, the transparent yellow oxide and the quin rose are from Daniel Smith, and the cobalt blue is from Holbein. Okay, now the reason I like to start with red, yellow, and blue is because it allows me to get to a wide variety of grays, which is exactly what I'm going to need. Okay, and gray meaning not battleship gray, but lots of beautiful variations of gray. Now I am going to bring in just a little hint of horizon blue, which is, I'm no longer using cerulean blue. It's kind of taken over. It has a lot of opacity, but in this first stage, I can actually use a lot of opaque paint because I'm just going on white paper. But I like it in my sky because it just, it warms up the cobalt blue a little bit and just gives it more of that sky color that I want. Okay, so we're going to test that. I think that looks pretty good. And I just go right on. Sometimes I will pre-wet the paper, but in this case, because I want to go around a lot of areas, I'm not going to pre-wet. Oh, a little too much pigment in there. So I'm going to go ahead while this is wet. Okay, bring in a little more horizon blue as I move on down the paper. So this first wash, this sky, I'm putting in a little more pigment than I'm going to, put it down in the snow. So, but this first wash, usually I'm putting lots of water, a little bit of pigment. So now I'm going to add more water to this mixture. I still have a parent mixture of red, yellow, and blue. And then I just grab different colors in here. And I'll just start bringing those in. And I'm not going to bring in the red of the barn yet because it's a darker color. Okay, I'm just going up to the white of the snow. And there's a white line there. Okay, so now just basically set the sky color. That's about it. And then gone over everything. Now I need to focus on what whites I'm leaving behind. And I'm pretty much going to do very, very light, but I want it grayish, kind of more cooler because of that blue sky, but not blue. And then let's kind of test. There we go. That looks pretty good. Okay. And it's on the left edge of my tracks. I know is where I've got some of that whiteness coming. Now, I don't necessarily want a hard line right there, but I also don't want it to bleed too much. A little bit is fine because all of this will feel very dark. Or sorry, it feels very dark right now, but once I get the darks in, then it will lighten up. Because value can be very relative. Okay. And same with temperature. Okay, so see how I'm leaving just those highlights there. And then I know as I come down here, I can get a little more pigment. Oh, I don't want it that warm though. Okay. And yes, I'm continue to wet the surface because I want these to continue to bleed. And I will leave a few whites here and there. Oh, not that blue.
Caitlin, or I'm sorry, Brienne.
Yep.
Is your board at an angle?
Yes, thank you. It is at about a 30-degree angle.
Thanks.
And I always paint at an angle. Actually, when I'm on site, I'll paint at even more than this, but in the studio, I paint at 30 degrees. Okay. All right, that's just the start. There we go. So, and now I'll let this dry. So I'm going to suck up some of these beads of water though, and I might just soften a few edges so they're not all the edges are sharp. Some edges, there is a sharp edge on some of them. And some of these, they're like little divots in the snow. And when it divots down, the plane will catch the light. And then as it comes up, there'll be a shadow. Okay. All right. There we go. So this is just the first wash. And it's basically, I've toned down all the white and just leaving the little highlights here and there. And then I will come back in. The next step will be the middle values of this back tree line. Okay, and then the middle values of the shadows. Okay, and that will help connect the shape. I try to connect as much as I can with those shapes. And then I bring in the darks and the details. Okay, so while this is drying, let me go ahead and explain my supplies. Okay, because we've got some time. So my palette, okay, of colors, I have a lot of colors, but I don't use them for every painting. But let me show you basically my stock, the main colors that I use. So let's go ahead and start here. Now, not all of these wells do I use. I always have test wells okay, that I've put a new color in. I'm trying to see if I like it. If I haven't used it in a year, then out it goes and a new one goes in. Okay, but let me show you my stock ones. So I've got transparent red oxide, which is from, it's like burnt sienna. It's from Daniel Smith. Transparent yellow oxide from Daniel Smith. Now, a lot of people ask me why do I use these instead of burnt sienna or yellow ochre? So I'll just answer that now. There's no, I love burnt sienna. So, but I love the transparent and the nature of this transparent red oxide. And I just happen to love the warmth of it. So I kind of switched over to that. Yellow ochre, I always used to use, but I've stopped using it because it was a little opaque. But then raw sienna, which is similar, was not as warm as yellow ochre. And this transparent yellow oxide is the good in between for me that I have just fallen in love with. And I probably use this pigment the most or one of the most. Okay. And then this one is my bright yellow, which right now I'm using permanent yellow lemon from Daniel Smith. I do not use cadmiums anymore because I don't like the way they mix, is the main reason. This is permanent orange from Daniel Smith. This is just some red, and I'm always changing that out. I hardly ever use it, but when you need it, you need it. So this is quinacridone rose, alizarin crimson permanent, carbazole violet from Daniel Smith. I'll come back to these. This is Payne's Gray, cobalt turquoise. I don't using that one. Cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, and sap green from Daniel Smith. And oh, I also have a neutral tint. Now you might ask, the neutral tint I just use for studies. So, or as a shortcut for a dark, but I'm always mixing something else within it. So I don't use it pure. Payne's Gray, I also use for studies, but I also use for mixing greens. It's a great blue gray, so I'll use it with my bright yellow or the trans red yellow oxide to mix a green. I mix most of my greens, even though I do have sap green, but I only use sap green as a mixture with other things again. Okay, so these ones in the corner, these are my opaques. And this is lavender, which I use for every painting. It is somewhere in my painting, almost always. Then I have horizon blue and cobalt teal blue. Horizon blue is from Holbein, sorry, I should say lavender is from Holbein, so is horizon blue. And cobalt teal blue is from Daniel Smith. And I use either this turquoise one or this blue one as an accent color, or like you saw, sometimes a little bit in my sky. Okay. Those are my main pigments, okay? But I'm always, like I said, trying new ones because we can't help ourselves. Okay, let me, while this is still, yep. All right, let me quickly go over my brushes. And so this, I love mops or quills, okay? Quills actually, because I like them to go to a point. And I actually have a couple that I like, and these two are great, and they're really equal. I could use either one. This one's Raphael Soft Aqua. It's a number 8. I love it because it's the biggest one I can find. And it's wonderful. It holds a lot of water, and so it makes a wash nice and easy. All right, and Da Vinci Casaneo, C-A-S-A-N-E-O. Okay, and this is a number 6, their biggest one. I always get the biggest one I can get. But they all come to still a pretty good point so that I can go around certain areas I want to paint around, okay? All right, and then, so those I need for the first wash, okay? And then mostly for the rest of the painting, I use Escoda Perla, the Torre White short handle, I think they call them. It's just synthetic rounds. I have, you can see I have 2 number 18s. I like the number 18. I can use this for the whole painting. So I really could paint the whole painting with these 2 brushes and be just happy. I mean, it goes to enough of a point. I could use this the whole time. Now, if I really do want to get to detail, I have another Escoda Perla, and I usually use a 10 or a 12 for my details. Okay. Those are the bulk of my brushes. Now, I am playing with some fun new ones I thought I'd show you. And I'm liking them. This one is huge. I love it. And they're from AsianBrushPainter.com. And this I have done with bigger paintings and doing big areas and wetting things down. And it's called the Bear King. I have no other name for it but that. If you go on the site, a lot of it's in Chinese. These are Chinese brush painting or brushes. They're a family-run business from Hong Kong, so it's pretty cool. This one I love as well. It also comes to a great point, and I love the fact of how long the bristles are. I mean, that's just, it's awesome. And so you get some great effects with that. So I'll probably use this today for fun as well. And it's called the, something rat. It's like Chappy Rat or Chatty Rat. Something like that. I wrote it down. Now I can't remember.
Cheeky Rat.
Cheeky Rat. There
Right.
you go. Cheeky Rat. And it's their large one. That's the only name I know. That's what they have on their website. So it's really cool. Okay. Another thing about this is Saunders Waterford 200 pound. That's my favorite paper. Okay. It's cold press. Sorry, I should have said that. All right. Now, so let's go ahead. This is not as dry as I would like it, but we can go ahead and start painting into that. Okay, so what I'm going to put in now is some of these back trees. So I'm going to just bring out some more of this red, yellow, and blue mixture. But now I'm bringing out a little more pigment. I'm still going to have quite a bit of water though. So if any of you've seen Joseph Z's book, if you've been lucky enough to see it, I haven't, but I had a teacher teach me about paint consistency. And if you are interested, you can look up my YouTube channel, and I have a thing on paint consistency. And basically it's a way to think of water versus pigment ratio. So in this first part, it was really weak tea. You can think of it as tea, lots of water, a little bit of pigment. Next, I'm going into, like you go into coffee, there's a little more body, okay? And the next stages are milk, where you've got more pigment, less water. Then you've got cream, and then butter. And cream is actually the best stage. That's where I get my darks. Okay, so let's just start getting some. I might also bring in a little bit of trans red oxide, a little bit of that earth color, and I'm just going to mix some grays and some nice warm grays. Okay, we'll go ahead and start right here. Okay, I'm just bringing in some shapes here. And as I paint, I'm going to be grabbing various colors. Okay, so what I don't do is mix. I do a lot of mixing on the palette, but I also do a lot of mixing on the paper. I do both. Okay, I'm just dabbing. I do control the water in my brush with paper towels. Okay, and I have paper towels in my pocket of my apron. And that way I can just dab at it without having to get my hands dirty or wet. It's great. It's funny. So another funny story, and I'll just keep talking stories unless you have a question. But
So
Oh,
Brienne,
yep.
this is Art again. Is that paper like totally dry or is it just slightly wet?
It's pretty dry. Like it's not going to bleed very much, but it's not totally dry.
Okay.
I would like it probably a little more dry, but that's okay. So I did go into some of this red, which is probably some kind of pyrrole red. I'm not quite sure because I wanted it just a little warmer than my Quinn Rose. So I did bring it in, but this is the only time when I would use this red is when I need a bright red like that. And I'll let it go ahead and bleed into, you know, that shape on the side, the tree shape. And we're going to come right in, bleed it in right there too, connecting my shapes wherever I can. What I was gonna, I lost my train of thought. Okay. Okay, so now what I'm doing is just gonna kind of get this. I'm squinting my eyes and I'm focusing on, that's why I like to do value studies. This whole shape, I'm treating it as one big shape, this mass of trees, not looking at individual trees. Okay, once you start to do that, unless it's a tree portrait, it can really, you can lose that freshness that I'm looking for. Okay. All right, so I still need some more pigment. And so I keep charging these pools, even though they're dirty, they're definitely dirty, but because I mix so much, but as long as I'm changing my mixture, it can stay fresh. Okay, I get the question all the time, how can I not get mud, right? Because I'm mixing so much. Well, the secret, at least my definition of mud is basically, if I were going to mix this whole thing together and paint this whole shape with no variation, then yeah, that's going to look awful. Okay. Okay. So what I do is I'm making this big mass. There's variation within that mass. And then I just finesse the edges to just get the idea that there's branches and trees. And even though I'm not going to individually paint all of those, I'm trying to just get the impression of them. Okay. Getting a little dry there. Okay.
Brienne, I have a question from Sandy. She'd like to know what advice you have for novice watercolor artists.
Okay, yes. The best advice I can give you is to, however you can, try to do consistent, focused practice. So if you've heard the term, you know, how many of you have heard the term that, okay, it takes 1,000 or 10,000 hours to get good at any skill, right? Or miles on a brush. It's all about just practice, practice, practice. Well, that's useful to a point, because what you want is, yes, you need to be able to, you know, learn from teachers, get feedback and stuff like that, but and you also got to get your hands dirty or your brushes dirty and try things. And you're gonna, you know, you're gonna have a bunch of bad paintings, and there's nothing wrong with that. Every painting experience is worthwhile, and I truly believe that. Okay. There is no wasted painting experience. Now, with that having been said, what I mean by focused practice is that, okay, you know, you do a painting or you do a study and actually do exercises. I love to have my students do that instead of always focusing on just a painting. Okay, because there's so much that there's so much pressure that comes with having to do a painting all the time. So if you instead focus on trying to just focus on a technique at a time, you know, like trying to do wet into wet for a while, or focus on maybe a painting went wrong because you mixed too much or not enough on the paper and too much in the, what's it called? It's a palette. Okay. And so if you did stuff like that, then, you know, you would, in the next painting or the next study, you'd focus on working on just that. Work on a piece at a time instead of the whole thing. Okay, that's what I mean by focused practice. And that type of thing will help you get better quicker. The other thing is, don't be afraid to do a painting, the same painting, same subject, again and again and again. Okay, so many times we do a painting and we're like, I don't like it. But then we move on to the next painting, right? Without thinking, well, what could I have done to improve it? What don't I like about it? And then what do I need to do in the future? So instead of doing that, why not, since you've already done the painting once, doing it again eliminates some variables. And there's the scientist in me saying, eliminate as many variables as you can. And then that's how you can learn quicker. So those are some tips and stuff. There is no shortcut. We all, I think, know that. It's just about taking pieces off that you can chew. Okay.
Great advice.
Yeah. All right. So now what I'm going to do, so this is all still just one big middle value mess. Okay. So I'm going to come in with this shadow now, because again, I want to connect my shapes as much. I think this got a little dry, so it's not going to connect how I want, but that's okay, because I know that this is going to be darker, so I'm not as worried. I'm not worried about a line forming because I know I'm going to go darker on top of it. So there's things like that, learning when to freak out and learning when not to freak out. And that can be tricky for sure. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go into painting the shadow, which is a big part of this. Now, I want to get that blue look. I don't want it to get too gray, but I also don't want to use pure cobalt blue. That would be way too much. So I'm going to grab a little more yellow, again, more of the trans yellow oxide, more of the Quin rose. And I'm going to use those colors, very little bit of it, to, just going to grab some of both of them, to neutralize the cobalt blue. And why does that work? Well, because red and yellow are, you know, make a orange, and so it's opposite. Basically, you can think of that, opposite of the blue. And so now I've got a more neutral blue, but still nice and cool. So let's see how that's going to work. Yeah, that'll work. But then I'm also going to vary that as I paint. And more for just interest's sake. Okay. And I'm also going to leave a few, you know, because it's got the nice dappled light. You can get too crazy with dapple. So I don't want to do it too much, but I want to do it some. Now, the thing with shadow, and I'm really going to pay attention to this, and here, maybe I'll zoom in at this one. Let's zoom in so you can see what I'm trying to do, because it's going to be tricky. I need to get the shape of that shadow, which informs the terrain. Okay, so I need to get the shape of that and the light and stuff. So that's important, that it dips, it goes flat, it dips down and comes up and goes across. Okay. So that's the key thing, definitely more important than any kind of dappled light that I've got here, is getting that shape, or at least an impression of that shape again. It's not about getting things exact, or at least not what I try to do. Yes, question? Anybody?
So Brienne, I have a question, Art again. So would your shadows, you know, typically things that are in the distance are lighter value than those that are closer to the viewer. Would you do the same thing with shadows in this case?
You know, that's a good point. I mean, yes, if there was enough, like that's true for things that are in the distance. This isn't actually that far in the distance, but there would be a slight variation. You wouldn't have to put it as stark because, again, there's not a wide distance here. That happens because of aerial perspective, right? But in this case, we're not as far out. Does that make sense? Yeah, but still, it's nothing. Again, I like to say there's nothing wrong with variation. And so if, you know, I like to vary things, and so I'm probably going to bring some more value change in here than I have back here. But
so we have another question.
Yeah.
But I'm going to
I'll type an answer
on it. I know you're using 200-pound paper versus the 140 that Arches typically makes and some of the other manufacturers. Why do you use 200-pound paper?
Okay, great question. So I started doing it because I make, if anyone's seen any of my YouTube stuff, or I also have a teaching website, travelingcolorsstudio.com. I have some videos out that are free where I describe how I frame without glass. I frame my watercolors without glass, and I adhere watercolor paper to Gator board to make a panel for my plein air work. This is a long-winded way of answering your question, but that's how I started coming, and that's when I found 200-pound paper from Saunders Waterford. And so I started using that because I found it made better panels.
Okay.
It was really more for that I liked the how it just, I think the panels just needed the little thicker paper, at least from my experimenting. And that's when I started using it. But then I found that, boy, I like it anyways. So I just like the slightly, it's not like, I don't like 300-pound paper. It just acts different, where 200 still acts like 140 to me, but yet it doesn't warp quite as much. It still warps, but not quite as much. So I think that's really why I started doing it. So it's not at all necessary. It was just really more of a a personal preference thing. All right, I am going to squirt as I go. Okay. All right, I've got to stop getting so into this. And again, it's this area. Are you still see? Yeah, you are. Okay. Yeah, tell me if any time my head gets in the way or something. Okay, what I'm doing is trying to get a few of these highlights that also follow that terrain, because it all just helps to form this illusion of three-dimensionality.
David is asking, how do you adhere the paper to the panels?
I use acrylic medium. And you can, like I said, I have videos that explains my whole process. So you can definitely go to my YouTube channel, go to travelingcolorstudio.com. You can find Mother Framing Without Glass. But yeah, I use acrylic medium. And sometimes I will, so I make panels for painting plein air, but then I also will take a painting that I've painted just on regular paper. And then, oh, this should be warmer. That should be cooler. Okay, sorry. Just thinking out loud. Okay, what was I saying? It's so hard to talk and paint sometimes.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
You paint and come back to it.
No. You were asking about, oh, sometimes I will paint something before, just regular like this in the studio. That's what I'll do with my studio work. And then if I like it, then I'll adhere it to a board if I want to frame without glass. I do both. I frame things with and without glass, probably about 50-50. So sometimes it just depends on the painting. But a lot of my plein air work, I do just the boards because it's so much easier to travel with them for my events. That's really why I started it.
I wonder if you can zoom out again so we can see your reference photo and your grayscale.
Yep.
And what's the size of the painting that you're working on?
It's 12 by 14.
Okay.
And I really should be getting cool. I'm having fun. It's fun sometimes to shift these different colors, but I also have to be careful because I do want this surface to be cooler. So I've been noticing that I got a little warm there, but a little warmth, there's nothing wrong with that. But now I'm going to go back to more cooler colors, adding more blue into that. Okay. All right, and then this is nice and blue.
Another question about your bonding process that fascinates people.
Oh, I'm sure. Yep, it does.
Do you put wax on top of the watercolor painting if you
That's
don't
sometimes. I have various methods for varnishing or waxing. Yeah, the paintings. So that is one of my methods, and it depends on the finish that I want. So they give a very different look. And so it just depends on the painting, really, of which one I want to do. Wax is much more labor intensive than some of the others, but I love the way it looks. And it gives a very lustrous feel.
What was the name? You said traveling something for your YouTube?
Yep, it's well, my YouTube is Brienne M. Brown. Okay. And my website, which has the same videos, so you can go either one, but it also has other videos and classes on it, is travelingcolorstudio.com. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. All right.
And does traveling have 2 L's?
No.
Okay.
Nope, just like, no problem. Okay. All right, so let's see. So now I'm going in and I want to soften some of these edges. Excuse me. I can also soften some of these edges a little bit when it's dry, but it's nicer to do them when it's a little wet. Okay. All right, so we've got a good start, you know, and I'm going to go ahead and get some more pigment. And while this is still, it's semi-damp. So as long as I get out a bunch of the water from my brush, and I'll show you how I do that in just a minute, I can bring something in. As long as you don't, if you have more water in your brush than is on the paper, that's when you're going to get a bloom, okay? But what I do is you'll get some pigment and then I soak out the ferrule. I soak most of the water out in the ferrule, okay, by touching the paper towel to it. And then I can go in and I can get a nice soft edge, though I still want a little more blue. Okay, soak out some of that water again.
So we're about an hour into this.
Great. Okay. I'll just. Thank you, Art. Okay. All right, that's all I'm going to do right now. If I do too big an area, that the dip needs to be darker right in there, but I think I'll do that when it's dry. Okay, so I'm going to go back and start getting in some other details into the background. So, but see, now I've got pretty much the middle values of all I need to do. So let's put in some darks and we'll see where the details are going to go. Okay, I might as well start with the building since it's kind of the main center. Okay, and I'm just going to, now I'm going to be using more pigment. So I'm going to be using consistency of milk to cream, basically. And it means more pigment, less water. It doesn't flow as well on the palette. But I'm going to be using the same color combinations. Okay, kind of get a dark red. And I'm going to put that shadow in. Okay, now not quite as dark for some of this tree shadow on the side of the building, which is great. And I'm just gonna kind of indicate a few lines. I should probably do this one with my detail brush so I can get a finer line on it. So I will bring out my number 12. Oh, my iPad's going to sleep. Okay. Gives me an idea. Don't have to get all of it in there. Okay. There we go. Now let's get the darks behind that building because that's going to help define the building. So for dark greens, that's what I love sap green for. So I'm going to get sap green and this carbazole violet, this green and purple. It's one of my favorite combinations for dark greens, but I still need some more of that light green actually before I bring the dark green in. Sorry. So let's do some of the trans yellow oxide and cobalt turquoise. Maybe just a touch of sap green, but I want to mix those other colors in too. A lot of times with greens, I mix all different kinds of things for a green. That's why it's really hard. Sometimes people ask me, well, what colors do you mix your greens with? But I use my yellow and my 2 yellows and then a combination of blues, and then I add orange, red, purple, all kinds of stuff to vary it up. No, by the way, in this, I know in the picture, the this major pine tree is actually in front of the building, but I decided I wanted it in the back. So that was just a change that I made because I liked the idea of the shape going around the building better. Okay, now I need to get some of those darks in. Okay, I'm going around a few just light details. They don't necessarily add to the bulk of the composition, but they just add a little more detail and finesse. So what I'm doing is going around some possible posts, but really what it is just breaking up that line. Okay, but I'm getting too much into that, so. Okay, I think I'm gonna have that whole thing be a pine tree. I don't want too much variation in there. I just want it to be one big mass. And then bring in a few darks. I'm always squinting my eyes, trying to just get the feel of the painting.
Brienne, we have a question about the tree shadow on the building.
Yes.
Where is the tree that is casting?
It's over here. It's actually over here. So there's a big tree on this side.
Okay.
It's casting it this way and casting it onto that. And there's branches that are coming out. That's what's getting cast onto the building.
Okay.
Great question, because I had the same one when I was looking at it. Like, what's going on? All right, now let's get some darks into this. Background trees. Now, sometimes with these background trees, I will get these darks in while things are damp. But don't always do I have the time to do that. Okay, I'm gonna, while I'm going, I'm just gonna, again, this may seem dark right now, but remember also as watercolor lightens, you always have to remember that they, so that the values I'm putting down, I know are a little darker than I want. But I'm bringing in another layer of these brush, because here, this is a scene just down the street from me. And we're just surrounded by tree after tree after tree. It was funny because moving from Utah, where green was my accent color, I all of a sudden was surrounded by by trees. And I had to learn to deal with green. It was quite a challenge for someone who's not used to that.
Talking to other artists, green is a challenge for a lot of people.
Yep. I know when I first got there, people would ask me, oh, how do you love it? Don't you just love it there? And I was just like, too many trees. And they were like, what? You can't have too many trees. I'm like, yeah, you can actually. Yeah, you can and you do. So it's all good though.
So in Utah, did you paint reds and oranges too?
Yeah. Reds, oranges, purples, browns. I mean, there was just so many variety of colors, and then you'd have the off green here and there, you know. It was just different. But you know, there is beauty wherever you go, and it's just different. And I'm really glad that I moved here and got the different experiences that I've gotten. If you asked me that when we were moving, I wouldn't have said that, but I miss the mountains. I do. But I love the woods here. I love the trees and the skies and the fog. I love all of that. So this is a hard thing. So right now I'm trying to you know, really squint my eyes, pick out a few things. I'm not going to be able to pick out everything, and I'm not trying to get exact trees because that would be impossible. I'm trying to just pick out a few things that really stand out to me and then kind of fill in the rest. Okay. All right. So I'm going to bring in just a few of these branches, the bigger ones. And then eventually, I'm not going to probably get to all the details in this painting that I want to. So I will finish those though and give you the finished idea. But just kind of show you what I start to do is just to bring out a few of these, you know, branches here and there, but I bring out just a few, and then the rest can kind of be just an indication. If you do a few that look pretty good, then the rest, the brain will fill in. Okay. All right. Let me do some other things. There's a lot of stuff I have to get into there. I'm going to do this big dark shape here because it's actually important that I have a dark shape there because it's important for the composition. Oh, might bring a little bit of orange into that. Bring in more darks. Okay, So let me, I think there's a bunch of details and stuff I need to get into there. How are we doing on time? Okay. It's
about 8:23, so
yep.
you could go another 15 minutes if you wanted.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I can do that. So what I'm doing here is bringing in darks of some area, also warming up these brush, you know, there's the lovely brushes and stuff that are everywhere, and that's great. It gives a variation and variety to the scene. So it's not just about, it's about breaking up different spaces and stuff like that. Okay. I'm going to, I think I'm going to get some definition on this shadow so I can show you more about forming the road. Okay, so let me bring back my bigger brush here. Okay, I need to clear off an area because I've lost my blue. Okay, all right, so now that this is dry here, what I'm going to do is just darken but I still want it pretty cool, so I don't want to warm it up too much. But again, I don't want pure cobalt blue. But I notice I'm just looking at the variation within the shadow, and I want to bring in some of that because it will help with the feeling of the road turning over the way I want it to. So part of painting in, you know, shadows in snow is looking for those subtle variations. Like, see what that even just did.
Mm-hmm.
I love it, you know, and that's just all it is it's helping within the shadow to get that slight variation so that I can see that dip. And really it's about value. As much as I'm talking about temperature too, the more important piece in this case is the value. And I noticed that that value is darker. That shape there is darker there. Now look what that does to the shadow too. Do you see how this felt like it was almost just lying on top?
Mm-hmm.
When you get darker shapes within a shadow, it actually helps the shadow feel more transparent. And that's because there's something darker within that shadow. So now you've lightened the value of the shapes around it. It's that, have you ever seen those, you know, those optical illusions, right? Where they show you, okay, it's the same value in a checkered thing in the shadow. Let's see, the dark, the light part in the shadow is the same as the dark part in the light. And you look at it and you're like, no way. Well, it's this optical illusion in a way, but it's because we see things in, you know, we see relationships. And it varies depending on what's next to it. So things appear either darker or lighter depending what's next to it. Okay. All right. Okay, so even just that little bit. Same thing back here. I need to darken. Okay. If I darken this side, it will help that shadow back in there. Maybe I need to zoom in on that one a little. Come on. But see, all I did is put those little dark lines in, but you see how all of a sudden that helps that shadow feel more like a shadow instead of sitting on top. And so the more little things I do this, that'll help. The other thing, I'm gonna actually do let's go back out again. Okay, I'm gonna do a little bit of this grass coming through. Oops, grass coming through the snow to show you how I do that. So we'll bring some of this warm transparent yellow oxide, add a little bit of orange to it. Okay, and I'm just, actually it has some nice red in it as well in the foreground. So, okay, this kind of stuff it's details, but it's stuff like this that I would do after the fact, but I'll just show you how I would handle it. Okay, I'm just looking for various shapes. I'm trying to notice where is the ragged edges. It's kind of more on the bottom. They're smoother on top. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for, not exact weeds, you know, and looking for little shapes that I can see. Okay, now when it gets into the shadow though, I still want a warm color, but now it's got to be a little cooler and darker. Is that going to be dark enough? No.
Do you ever do dry brush?
Well, yeah, sure. Dry brush meaning, you know, something quick across the thing. I do in certain areas. So, for example, whenever I'm going to do, you know, sparkle on the water or stuff like that, it works really well. Or in like an area of grass, or yeah, it's fun to do. Sure. Okay. Soften some of these. And then you go back out. So it's the variation within what's sunlit and what is in shadow. Okay. Now, I will need to also go back into some of this and actually punch in. There's still some darks that need to be put in there, and for form and stuff, but that gives you an idea of going from sunlit to shadow to sunlit. Okay, and all of this will also help with this feeling of this shadow. Okay. So is there any other questions or something you want me to see before we go into question and hour? I still have a little.
So I have you probably don't have time to do this if you were going to do it.
Let me know.
But, so I see some variation in the big shadow across the picture on your iPad.
Yeah.
So how would you do that in the painting that you're doing now?
Well, what I would do is, so a lot of times I kind of have to, the hard thing about watercolor, well, okay, there's many hard things about watercolor, but one hard thing is that we're always equating value to white or light paper, right? So that's why I like to work across the whole thing and kind of keep going with these values to see if I need to change something. So if there's an area in here that I need to, like, for instance, this is light right here, which it is kind of light on this side, but then it darkens as it comes up this hill. Mm-hmm. So if I wanted to do that, I would wait till everything is totally dry, and basically I would glaze over it. Okay, just that area.
Okay.
So it would have to be done while things are dry, and I would glaze on top, but I don't glaze a lot. So I only do it after I've kind of put the bulk of everything in. Does it need it? Okay. So the more I work, the less and less I look at the photo. The more and more I look at the painting and think, what does it need as a painting itself? Because to me, that's my main goal, is creating a painting that has the feeling that I want or whatever I'm trying to convey. But yeah, to answer your question, it would be, I would see if I needed to vary some thing in here, and kind of like I did with the ruts, wait till it's totally dry and then do that. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's still a lot more details and stuff to do on this. But this is basically how I would build it. And most of the big shapes are there. There's a few other little shapes I still need to do and some details. And I'm going to go in and put more detail on some of major, like this tree here, and a little more on these front trees. But the back trees are pretty much, they're just shapes. That's what I want them to kind of feel like. So
Marie has a
great questions.
Marie has a question. She asks, do you ever use white gouache for highlights?
I used to when I first started painting, but now I don't. Oh, sorry. I must be tired. Gouache, yes, I do. Now, gouache, I will use, like, I probably am not going to use it in this painting. Unless I decide to put this figure in. Sorry, that I studied over here. I might put a figure in here. And then I might have a little highlight on the figure, but I wouldn't put it as much as I can go around the whites of this. I'd rather use the paper. But if it's a little line, yeah, totally, I'd use gouache. Yes, I'm sorry, I was thinking masking fluid when I first heard the question, so that was my fault. And masking fluid, I have nothing against it. I just am lazy and I don't want to let it dry. So that's the only question.
Mary is asking, where are you going to put the lavender in this painting?
Well, you might not have seen, but I actually did put some of it back into here. I love to put it back. I used it to mix some of this back gray, and I should have said that. So I love to use it when I mix grays like this. But I didn't use much of it here, which usually I would, but I didn't. But I will be putting it in some of the dark areas. I like to mix it in with my darks, which I know sounds really backwards because it's light, but especially for background darks, because it gives that kind of body to it that Pennsylvania has atmosphere, and it creates that milky look, which you get that milky look when you look in the background. And so that's what I love to use lavender for. Well, I use it for a couple things, but that's one of them. Yeah. And another way I use lavender is I love to splatter it into areas, but I didn't do it in this one, but I love to splatter it in areas where I just want to just get a nice overall gray. I could have done it into here if I wanted to, but I didn't. But that's what I'll do with lavender too, is in a gray area, I will splatter lavender and it creates texture. So that's another way.
And here's not a question, but a comment from Linda. She says, it's impressive that the detail mostly comes from the variation in values rather than from lines and strokes.
Yes, very much so. And that's what you know, that's what I'm always trying to do, is trying to get that feeling of a lot of detail without going in and painting all the details. There will be more details I put into this for sure, but most of these details are implied. And that's the way I like to do it, is to kind of just do that. Now I'll go through, like, the edge of this got a little harsh. So there's a lot that I'm going to need to go in and soften some of that. And I can always do that after. So it's really about, I like to work across the whole painting like this. And if an area needs to be kind of softened or that kind of stuff, I can always do that later. But this gives me the whole, as long as I'm following my plan here. Sorry, let me move that over. As long as I'm following my plan, this is the goal that I'm looking for. And as I start to make sure that I've got at least this structure, then the amount of detail I put in is really up to me. You can decide how much or how little to put in.
Wonderful. It looks fabulous. I can't
Yep.
believe you did that in an hour and a bit.
Oh, well, not quite done, but I talk too much. Anyways.
Well, I think at this point, if the audience would like to unmute, if you have a question that you'd like to ask Brienne, or maybe even tell her something new that you learned by watching her paint. I was just shocked when you put in those dark lines in the front ruts in the snow. What a difference those simple lines made.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, if anyone has a question or a comment, I'd love to answer that. I will say one thing. I think of myself, like someone mentioned that it was amazing how much I could do with the change of value. Value is what I focus on. So I like to tell my students, you saw the colors I used. I don't match color. Like I didn't try to get this exact red, or I didn't actually try to get the exact blue that's there. But what I look for is I'm matching the values. I'm trying to match the values, and then the colors you can actually be a little more free with. And that's why I love watercolor. So anyways, that's like how I think about it.
Someone is still curious about where the tree for the shadow on the building is.
Okay, let me show you on, well, this might not be the, you know what? Let me share my screen and I'll show you the reference photo. All right.
That'd be great.
Maybe that would be easier to see. Okay. So let's go back. All right. So if we zoom in here, it's this tree. See how this tree, and it's being sunlit. See, all these shadows are coming. The sun is coming from the right, very hard. There's long shadows, and it's this long shadow from this tree that is on that building. Okay, so this tree I haven't put in my painting yet, and I will. And I'm probably going to have to bring in a few highlights. Probably I will with gouache a few things just to indicate, that lightness that's there, but that's where it's coming from. Okay. Is that tree.
And
all right.
The top, almost the top branches of the tree.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
such a long shadow.
It is a long shadow. And so it's a lot of these branches that are going really every which direction. So I know it looks a little confusing because it's coming, it looks like it's angled this way, but it's because it's from, think of the branches, they're going in all directions. And so it's the long shadow that's going across this whole yard being cast onto the building. Okay. Great question, though. I know it's confusing sometimes.
Let's see. I have a couple of comments here. You probably can actually see them yourself. Barb says, the atmosphere achieved in the painting is wonderful. Thank you for a wonderful demo, Brienne.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yep. Well, if we don't, I can also say, another suggestion here, let me share another story with you, since, and ask me a question if you have something in between. But going back to the one person who said, if you're a beginner, where do we go from here? One thing is that there was if anyone's heard the book or read the book called Art and Fear, if you have not, it's fantastic for anyone who's an artist. But one of the stories in there that I love, there was a ceramics professor or pottery professor, I'm not sure which, one of those. And for half his students, he said, okay, you're going to be graded on one piece, one final project. And the ones that are the best, they're going to get the best grade. Then the other half, he said, you know what, you're going to be graded on weight. And we're going to weigh it at the end of the class. And whoever has the most, you have to have so much to get an A. Well, at the end of the semester, the ones that came up with the best quality pieces were from the weight group, not the single group. Because instead of thinking and trying to figure out what is the perfect piece, they were getting their hands dirty. Now, did they make a lot of crappy pottery? Yeah, probably. They made a lot of junk, but they also learned about their material. And that's when they were able to get actually higher quality pieces. I love that story because it really shows you that it's good to learn. You want to learn all these things, but at the end of the day, you also have to get down and get your hands dirty, right? And make a bunch of bad paintings, and it's okay. I see someone has a question here. Do I ever feel drawn to paint an abstract? I love abstracts, and I have painted abstracts. And the one thing I like to tell people is that, when I paint and when I design something, even though I do, a lot of realism and impressionistic stuff, but I'm trying to make it look real, but at the same time, I am working with abstract concepts. When you do an abstract, you're purely thinking of those design principles, composition, shape, where you're going to, the elements of art and the principles of art. You're thinking about those things because you don't have something to look in, you're not trying to make something look three-dimensional. But when you're doing representational art, it is just as important to think of those design concepts. And so it's this balance between looking at if you want to do realism, yes, you want it to look real, but you also have to think about the abstract nature of it. Because all painters, we're all abstracting something. I mean, that's what we do. We're abstracting nature, right? We're putting a 3D world on a 2D surface. So it has to be abstracted. And so, it's just, abstracts are great. And it's great to think about those concepts because then it can help you with your realistic stuff if that's the direction you want to go. But yeah, I love painting abstract paintings. Sometimes it's freeing.
Right. Yeah. Marie sent a question to me. She said, do you have any opinion on granulating paint versus non-granulating?
I think the only thing is if you like it, great. If you don't use it. It is, so for example, I love the color of French ultramarine. I cannot stand how much it granulates because for ultramarine blue, I mix it a lot. So it ended up feeling like it was dirty everywhere. But I love the way my transparent red oxide granulates because I tend to use that in the ground and, not in the sky area. So it depends. Where do you want it? Do you like it granulating in certain areas and not in others? Creates great texture, but you as the artist need to decide what is it you're trying to achieve. So I'm not big on hard, fast rules. I'm like to call them guidelines, but then you as the artist decide, once you understand the concepts, how to use those concepts to express what you want. So, all right.
All right. Any last call for questions? All right. Well, let's everybody, if you haven't unmuted, unmute now and let's give Brienne a round of applause for a great demo.
Aw.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brianna.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Nice
Very-
evening.
Loved it.
Super. Beautiful,
Good.
beautiful
Great.
work.
Thank you very much. And I'll let you all see the final piece soon.
Later.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Hey,
Good
look
to
forward
know.
to it.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right.
Bye.
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 Happy
Bye.
painting.
Yeah.
Happy painting, everyone. Keep it up.
Yep.